Sabby, I know we've been looking at this train wreck that is the Democratic Party. We have seen at the local level what the sycophants are willing to do to protect somebody like Wasserman Schultz. Then you think about the way things are at the national level and how bad they've gotten. This is this is what I call the front person, because we all know that somebody like Pelosi is still running the show behind the scenes. But this is what the speaker in waiting, supposedly, had to say today regarding, dealing with the Trump administration.
To figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
He is. Let me tell you, that to me just, and I really don't follow the electoral stuff. What a pussy. Like, I have never seen somebody just so blatantly be so weak and pathetic, like openly. What can we do?
Well, aren't they weak on purpose, though, Sabby?
Correct. I mean, he's correct in the current sense that Republicans have control of the House and they have control of the Senate, although Democrats can still use the filibuster option because that hasn't been removed if they really wanted to try to push back against the Republicans in Congress. But when they do have control of the House and the Senate, they're not proactive. They blame the parliamentarian. And I reminded people of this several times. George W. Bush, during his presidency, there were issues with the parliamentarian. So he just fired the parliamentarian. Same thing can happen under the Democratic Party, but they choose not to. They've been very passive. And I really do feel like during the Biden-Kamala administration, they really should have spent that time being more aggressive and proactive for working class people, the people that the large base of the Democratic Party, particularly for black voters that they can't win without the black vote. Like, I felt like they really should have gone all in, been very proactive. But again, that's really not who they are as a party. And that's definitely not who the Democrat leadership figures are, like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer as well. And Barack Obama is still pulling strings behind the scene as well, although I do think his start has been starting to fade. But I think that they don't really want to they don't want transformation. They want to do what helps their donors. They want to do what's in their best interest. Hakeem Jeffries is probably thinking about his next political move for himself, not necessarily for his district. And he's an interesting one because a lot of people may not know this, but Hakeem Jeffries, originally, when he first ran for Congress, he was actually losing in the polls. He was running against, I believe his name's Charles Barron. He was running against him, who he used to be a Black Panther. And he was leading in the polls at that time. Then there was, and I really do believe this is a coordinated effort, there was a smear that was against Charles Barron that was from David Duke. And David Duke came out and he said that he supports like Charles Barron. So of course, obviously that negatively impacted Charles Barron's race. Next thing you know, Hakeem Jeffries shoots to the top of the polls and he wins. That's how Hakeem Jeffries got that seat. So it's important that people know some of the tricks that you saw used against like Jill Stein and other people. They've done these tricks before, and that's how they work hard to try to get their person in. So Hakeem Jeffries, again, is very much aware of what working people need. He comes from a family that was more charismatic towards like what Black voters need, et cetera. But he was bought and paid for a long time ago. And you see that also with Richie Torres. And you see so with Jasmine Crockett. I've been warning people, they're kind of easy to spot. They target people that they feel, number one, are lawyers, or they think they have the representation as far as the way that they look. So they're going to represent the Black community. That's one way to get that support. But then the other thing is this is fake. It's not real. It's to convince the voters that they're going to do something for you because they look like you, but they're not. They are bought and paid for. And I don't see Hakeem Jeffries trying to push for any type of fight to improve the Democratic Party. He'll push back against the Republican Party. But when it comes to like the working class people and the minimum wage, all of these things that people need just to make a basic living here in the United States, that's not what they're paid to do.
I think you know that they're bought and paid for. That's the end. That's really the end of the day. What matters, they're bought and paid for. I am sad about the Jasmine Crockett thing because I remember when she was in this Texas legislature and led that walkout. And we actually had her on the show for doing that. She led a walkout of the Texas legislature so that they didn't have enough people to pass this anti-choice legislation. And it was a badass move. So I'm like, all right, cool. Let's get her on the show. You know, we had her on the show. And I found her so inspired, you know, from that. And then when she got into Congress, I felt like, I'm like, cool, like that's really cool.
And then she came on. Then she came on again when she was in Congress.
And again, she's been nice to me. She's been good to me, but it's been very disappointing to watch the trajectory from someone who led a walkout, you know, albeit on an issue that's easy to get behind. I mean, you know, but that was the issue. But that was pretty ballsy thing to do. They let down and risked getting, I mean, it was ballsy. So I don't know. I find her like very disappointing.
And much like Alex, it's the same thing. You know, I tried to reach out to Jasmine not too long ago and just kind of, you know, be like, hey, would you be willing to come back on the show?
Well, yeah. It always happens that way.
That's what happens because they cannot be confronted with the reality of what the problem is. The problem is our failed political and economic system. That's what it is. And they cannot be confronted with that because they immensely benefit from it. I mean, Jasmine is in a situation, just like Alex is in a situation, where if they simply play their cards right, they've got that seat for 30 years. Like, they don't have to do anything. They just kind of have to, you know, mug it up for the cameras, if you will, kind of like how Senator Murphy, who was trying to see if he could find his lane in the progressive area, that didn't work out too well too quickly. They've got all the smoke for Trump, but they had none of it for Biden, especially when it came to Palestine. And so when this happens, and I'm sure you're very familiar with our progressive whisperer when it comes to corporate media clips, case study QB, he really does an amazing job of grabbing this relevant stuff. So when somebody like the supposed leader in the House of the Democratic Party says there's nothing we can do, well, if you want to talk about the worst thing that Trump is doing in his administration on the domestic side, we know on the foreign policy side, it's clearly Palestine. But on the domestic side, it's what he's doing with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And of course, he's going to gut that to shreds. So this is what's going on.
The Trump administration shutting down the country's top consumer watchdog, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, basically just closing it. Every worker there was ordered to stay home. CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich is with us now with the latest here. What's going on?
So these employees, they get an email saying that they're not going to be showing up to the office, and they're also being instructed not to do any more work as it relates to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which, of course, as we know, is exactly what it sounds like, to protect everyday Americans from financial fraud, combating some subprime mortgage crises, and helping to end junk fees for everyday Americans. This is an effort led by Elon Musk and Doge at the direction of the Trump administration. There was a tweet that Elon Musk sent out on Friday that was sort of foreshadowing what was to come. It was essentially, you can see it right there, it was CFPB, RIP, sorry, a lot of acronyms there, but essentially foreshadowing that this was the next agency that that Doge and the administration was going to be looking at. Also, we should note that the website, the homepage, is down. They've taken their X handle off, and they're essentially stopping any more incoming funding into the organization. You can see just what people essentially get there from the I got to get this acronym right, the CFPB. And essentially it is to protect Americans, 200 million Americans protected, about $636 billion that is funneled into providing veterans with financial relief because they have been defrauded, and about $6.1 billion in estimated savings in overdraft fees for everyday Americans. So there's something there.
The financial crisis, this is one of the things that they came, you know, which was pretty bad for America.
Right. But then people tried to get rid of it. Republicans tried several times through Congress to get rid of this. It didn't work there. But could it work here? You never know. There's a lot of employees that have filed lawsuits about this. This can move pretty quickly. We know that judges have stepped in and put pauses on things like with USAID. Could that happen here? We'll see.
Maybe the best thing, if the only good thing that came out of the Biden administration was the improvements of the NLRB, and Lena Khan obviously doing a really good job in her role. And Kamala Harris spends basically 3 months campaigning with Liz Cheney. And so we can't, when when the people who live in Newton and Brookline and places like that try to point their fingers at people and tell you, how dare you not listen to us anymore? It's like, because you don't have problems. You just have concerns. People that have problems don't give a flying fuck about your feelings, and they shouldn't. The reality is that we have two corporate Wall Street, Silicon Valley owned parties. And anybody who thought the GOP wasn't owned by Silicon Valley better believe that they're owned by them now. Because that's, I mean, between Musk and Peter Thiel, they've got everything covered. And they're going to gut everything until we come to the conclusion that a labor R word is the only way out of this.